You hear these words all the time, right? Mass murderer, serial killer, lone wolf. They get thrown around constantly, but what do they really mean? Today, we're going to cut through all that noise. We're demystifying the language of violence to figure out the crucial differences between these killers and why getting it right matters so much. You know, this quote from G.K. Chesterton, it really hits you. It's this powerful reminder that the things we find monstrous aren't some outside force. They can come from within human nature itself. It's a heavy place to start, for sure, but it's a necessary one for the conversation we need to have. These terms are everywhere. Breaking news, true crime documentaries, you name it. But are they just different words for the same thing? Not even close. The difference isn't just about being technically correct. It has huge, real-world consequences for how crimes are investigated and how we all think about the threats out there. And let's be real, there's a reason we're all so fascinated by this stuff. We're just wired to trying to understand the why behind these horrible acts. But that fascination, when it's fed by the wrong language, can really blur the lines between killers who are actually very different. And that just leads to a whole lot of confusion about what's really going on. So when these labels get mixed up, it's more than just a simple mistake. It can completely warp our perception of a threat, leading to fear where it shouldn't be, or even bad policy. For the investigators on the ground, though, a precise label is everything. It's the first step to building a profile, figuring out what the killer might do next, and creating a strategy to stop them. So how do the experts deal with all this chaos? How do they bring some clarity to the whole situation? Well, they have a playbook, a literal manual that gives them a system for classifying violent acts, making sure that everyone from the FBI all the way down to a local sheriff is speaking the exact same language. It's a pretty simple idea, right? You can't really fight an enemy you can't even define. By creating this clear, shared vocabulary, criminologists and law enforcement can finally start to see the patterns, to understand the motives, and ultimately to work a heck of a lot better at preventing future tragedies. And this is the tool they use, the FBI's Crime Classification Manual. The best way to think about it is like the DSM in psychiatry, but for crime. It provides the standard, official definitions that are absolutely essential if you want to have any kind of coherent investigation across the country. It's the rulebook. And here's where that manual gets put to work. It's a system called VICAP, which stands for the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. Basically, it's this massive national database. Police departments submit their case info, and the system starts connecting the dots, looking for hidden patterns that no single department could ever see, especially when a killer is on the move, crossing state lines. All right, so let's get into the heart of it. Let's break down the 3 fundamental archetypes of multiple victim murder that are laid out in that manual. Getting these core differences is the key to, well, decoding the whole language of violent crime. Okay, first up, the mass murderer. The 2 things you absolutely have to remember here are single incident and one location. The violence is all contained in one explosive event in one place. There's no time break between the killings. The crime starts and ends right there. Next, we have the spree killer. Now, like the mass murderer, their crimes are all part of one continuous, unbroken event. But here's the critical difference. They're mobile. They move from one location to another during their rampage, leaving a trail of destruction behind them across multiple scenes. And finally, we get to the serial killer. This is totally different. Here, the murders are completely separate events. They can happen over weeks, months, or even years. And the single most defining feature, the thing that makes them so scary and so hard to catch, is the cooling off period. This is an emotional reset button. They go back to their normal life, blend in, before that compulsion to kill comes back. This chart just lays it all out perfectly. Look, you see how the number of locations is what separates a mass murderer from a spree killer? But it's that last row, that time frame and that all-important cooling off period. That's what puts the serial killer in a category all by themselves. This right here is the master key to understanding it all. But, you know, things change, the world evolves, and so does the landscape of violence. Those classic archetypes we just talked about, they're now being joined by a newer, much more complicated threat that doesn't always fit into those old boxes. We're talking about the lone wolf. You see, their motivations are often playing a totally different game. While a lot of classic killers are driven by these deep personal psychological issues, the lone wolf is almost always fueled by ideology. Their goal isn't some twisted personal satisfaction. It's about making a violent political or religious statement. And very often, they are perfectly willing to die for that cause. So what does a lone wolf look like? Well, they almost always radicalize themselves, usually lost in some corner of the internet. They act completely alone, with no one giving them orders. And that's a key point. They have no formal ties to a terrorist group. They might be inspired by an ideology, but they aren't commanded by an organization. And this is what keeps law enforcement up at night. I mean, think about it. Traditional counterterrorism is all about infiltrating networks, listening to communications. But what do you do when there's no network to infiltrate, when there's no conspiracy to uncover? The old playbook just doesn't work, and that makes it incredibly hard to stop an attack before it's too late. So after all these definitions and categories, let's bring it all home. Why does any of this really matter? Why is getting these labels right more than just an academic game? Why is it a public necessity? It's because these labels are so much more than just words. They're tools. Practical tools that have a direct impact on our safety, our policies, and just our basic ability to make sense of violence. The right term guides the whole response. It tells police if they're looking for a killer who has probably stopped, like a mass murderer, or if they're hunting for someone who will almost certainly kill again, like a serial killer. It helps the media report accurately, which in turn helps us, the public, understand what's going on, shape good policy, and prevent misinformation and panic from spreading. Understanding these categories helps us make sense of the world right now. But it also forces us to look ahead. As technology keeps changing how we connect and how we isolate ourselves, and as ideologies spread like wildfire online, you have to wonder, how will these patterns of violence change? And are we going to be ready for whatever comes next?